Well, hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Jason Levine, and thank you so much for joining me today for the Friday Masterclass. It's been a while. Good to see you back here on all the various channels, Behance, YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. So thank you so much for joining. Oh, and Twitch as well. And today we're going to be talking about the, using track effects or clip-based effects, and when to use them, when to use both, when to not use one or the other. Truth is, oftentimes you'll use them in conjunction with one another. And it's funny because over the last couple of weeks and chatting with and just kind of surfing around the various subreddits and things, this still seems to be one of the things that a lot of, especially new users, are sort of unfamiliar with. And I get it because instinctively you wouldn't necessarily know there's the difference between clip mixer, clip effects, track effects. And especially when you have something like the Essential Sound panel, which allows you to sort of very freely mix things and not really think about how are those effects being applied. Where do those effects live? And we've talked about it, of course, many times here on the Masterclass if you're a regular viewer. And thank you for viewing. But I thought we'd recover that today. I thought we'd cover that again today and just kind of go in depth. And then I think at the end, I wanted to just pull up something totally unrelated in the Premiere Pro beta. And as I've mentioned before, for anyone who's a Creative Cloud member or subscriber, you have access to all of the video application betas, including Premiere, After Effects, Audition, Media Encoder. And these are updated almost daily in many cases. And this is, of course, where we bring a lot of new features or soon-to-be features right in the beta so that you can actually not only test them out, but you can give us feedback on your experience. Well, there's a couple things that we've added that will be coming soon to the release version of Premiere around color management. This is, I mean, if I go back for the 2+ decades I've been talking to all of you about Premiere, top 5 requests for sure, particularly where QuickTime gamma settings are concerned. If you know what I'm talking about. So we're going to take a moment at the end to kind of just showcase where that is and encourage you to try the Premiere Pro beta. So again, thank you so much for joining. I can see we've got people coming from various networks here. Let me just go over to some of the chats. Alberto Garcia, thank you. Richard Del Conner, Kung Fu Cowboy, nice to see you. Mehmet, great to see you. Oh, you were just watching Audio 101? Very, very cool, thank you. And Godwin Kenny, nice to see you as well. And over here we've got Gino Marbella and Umacorn. Happy Fancy Friday. It feels like a fancy Friday. I got my hair cut yesterday, not that you can really tell here. I had about 3.5 inches chopped off. But it's looking all right. It's a little poofy. I don't blow dry it, you know. I live in the desert, so my hair dries fast, but it's kind of getting a little wild. No one cares. Okay. So why don't we go ahead and let's get right into it. Switch over my screen, and we're going to go right into Premiere and probably use a familiar edit that I worked on with my young son some time ago. Oh, Ashley Nichols, what's up? So great to see you. Oh, and you know what? Actually, before I head over, so a couple weeks ago, in fact, here, thank you, Ashley, for reminding me. A couple weeks ago, I think I mentioned this to you just as an aside, but you know, I have, of course, a long history in this biz, and in my former pre-Adobe life, I was in the music business, and my break in the biz was via this man here, Roger Nichols. And once again, if you know, you know. Roger Nichols is one of the probably one of the most known and highly acclaimed recording engineers of all time. He was the primary engineer on all of Steely Dan's records. Oh, where did my face go? Why am I not seeing my... Oh, did that get lost somehow? There we go. There we are. Okay. Primary engineer on all of Steely Dan's records, John Denver, Diana Ross, so many others. He's worked with a gazillion artists between the late 60s and early 2000s. And I was fortunate enough to not only work with Roger, but to really be his protege. And if you know about Roger, then you know that he's actually literally the creator of one of the first, not only drum sort of machines, but drum replacement machines called Wendle. And Wendle actually provided the drums that you hear on, you can kind of see it right here, classic records like Steely Dan's Gaucho. And I'm not going to go into all the details around that, but in any case, Roger was not only an amazing engineer and a dear friend, but he also, I mean, if you know drum sounds and you know anything about well-recorded drums, again, he's sort of a man who's kind of responsible for capturing some of the greatest sounds ever, and percussion sounds and everything else. Well, his family contacted me not long ago because he had this archive of all of these drum sounds, drum recordings that he had done, and including sounds that were used not only in this Steely Dan era, but also with Donald Fagen later on, and then just a lot of other sounds which, if you've heard drum machines over the years, a lot of these things somehow ended up on various drum machines just because, oh, there I am with Roger and John Denver. We were recording and mixing his final album. You can see me. Same guy, I promise. Look at how dark my hair once was, just so you know. In any case, you can now access some of these incredible drum samples. So it's a collection. It's called the Wendle Sample Pack. It's over 500 individual one-shots of kicks, snares, hats, crashes, dozens and dozens of some of the finest recorded percussion elements you've ever heard. It's just magical stuff, and if you want to build or assemble drum kits, whether you use something like Contact or elsewhere, you can do that. These are all one-shots, so they're not pre-made kits. It's just all of these raw, beautifully recorded samples, and the site for that is Wendle Sample Pack. His daughters, Simply and Ashley, they're wonderful, wonderful people. They've kind of brought all this to life. And they got me involved to not only restore a lot of these early digital recordings, but to kind of bring them into the new era, into the 21st century. And they've been dormant for years. So if you want to check them out, there's some examples on there, but I highly recommend the pack, especially if you use a lot of drum samples and you want to build kits, or you want to replace your own drum sounds and use something like Drumagog. You know, you can turn these 24-bit waves into drum replacement content. So highly recommend this. It's awesome. Do it for the fam, again, and for Roger's legacy, and just keeping it alive. Also, there's all kinds of cool Steely Dan stuff. Have you been following any of that around the web? You know, the second arrangement, this long-lost tape, this very famous story about this song, and that got basically overwritten on the tape back in the day by an engineer accidentally. Well, again, now it's been brought to light, and it's been getting amazing buzz all across the world because it is sort of this, it was this holy grail song from Steely Dan that no one had ever heard and didn't even know it still existed. And lo and behold, Roger's family had this cassette tape of the only existing sort of rough mix of the tune. And it's magic. And if you love Steely Dan and you love kind of yacht rock, you'll love it. So check that out, and check out WendleSamplePack.com. Okay, so talking about track mixing and clip mixing. So I'm in the Sonic and Tails Quest for the Chaos Emerald edit that at the time, how old was he then? I think it was like 8. This was like the beginning of the pandemic. And I think I may have shared with you, my younger son wanted to do videos. I said, sure, you can do them, but you need to learn to edit. So he actually wound up doing a lot of this in Rush, and then we moved over to Premiere. And this has kind of all the sound design. So I'm just going to play a little bit of this for you. Let's just see. This is the finished one first, just for those of you who haven't seen it. And let's take a quick look. And here, I'll even go full screen and pull myself out of there, because that's the kind of guy I am. Here we go.
Nothing like a nice day in Green Hills, huh, Tails? Yeah, nothing like a nice day. Who's that guy over there? Well, he's doing bad things. We better go stop him. Just give me the Chaos Emerald. Nice one. Now stay out of my face. Yoshi. Ha! Ha ha ha! This Chaos Emerald is mine, and you're gonna have to fight me for it if you want it. You hear me? Do ya? Yeah! Come on! Hit me! Ah! Get out, okay? You were doing bad things. You wanna fight, huh? Ah!
Okay, that's enough. All right, so you get the idea. And like any real production, of course, it took a lot of work to get all these sounds and get all the sound design done and to mix all that sound design and to really glue it together and homogenize it together. Oh, and I see Simpsy has joined us as well. Hey, Simpsy and Ashley. It's so lovely to have you on the stream today. So let's talk about how this was done. So again, now, in the case of things like all of the sound design for the punches and everything, commonly, so I used a series of different sound effects libraries, and many of these actually I created myself. This is from, if you remember, months ago, well, a couple years ago, but we did this. Someone challenged me to do, like, how would I create all the sound design for a boxing film? And I actually manually recorded all of these punch sounds by, a combination of different things. Punching pillows, punching meat, not a la Rocky, but, not like I have hanging carcasses of... Anyway, so, but the problem is, of course, when you do all those things and, you build sound and you're doing sound design, they're not all going to sound the same. They're not all going to be from the same environment. So sometimes you want to treat things at a local level, on an individual level, treat one sample, one sound. And then there's other times where you want to treat the entire track with sort of the same kind of things. And this is where you might use something like compression to, again, even out all of the dynamics of multiple clips on your timeline. Or in the case of, say, music, you may have all of your music on a single track, and maybe you want to apply a specific type of EQ to all of the various music tracks on there to kind of scoop out a particular range to make room for voices or vocals or whatever. But at the same time, you may also need to treat those individual music tracks differently. Maybe they need individual level adjustments. Maybe they need individual EQ adjustments. Maybe they need noise adjustments or something like that. And in this case of a lot of these sound effects and sound design elements, some needed to be denoised, some needed to be EQ'd, some needed to be individually compressed or limited or made louder or made softer. So it was a lot of work, and it was a combination of things that go into this. So this is what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to highlight and specifically kind of talk about this little the little fight scene here. Now, this was done a couple years ago, so curiously, when these things were tagged, and now, by the way, and I can't remember if this may also be in the beta. I can't remember if this is in the current release version of Premiere or not. It isn't yet. It's coming. But one of the things that we're going to be talking about or going to be doing in Premiere is sort of auto tagging of your media. Right now, if you use the Essential Sound panel, which, by the way, for those of you new to this, you can access Essential Sound from the window menu. So all of our essential graphics, essential sound, these can be accessed here. And Essential Sound gives you the ability to tag your media, and you have 4 specific media types, which let me pull this up so you can see. So you have dialogue, music, sound effects, and ambience. And when you tag media as dialogue, for instance, what it does then is that it reveals to you all of the common effects and filters that an editor or sound mixer would typically use to process dialogue. And the same thing for music. So again, now some of these tags, I don't know. Okay, yeah, they're fine. So in this case, by tagging the music track, which I think there's a few down here towards the bottom, you're going to get loudness normalization, duration remixing. So again, that is our AI-based engine that will allow you to just drag the edge of a music track to a specific duration, and it via AI does all the editing for you to make it fit to a specific duration, which is very cool. And then you also have auto ducking, which a couple weeks ago we talked about side chain ducking. Same concept here. So if you have dialogue and you have music and you want the music to automatically dip down in volume when someone's talking, that's what this does. And it's as simple as tagging things as music, tagging things as dialogue, enabling this function, and then it kind of does the work for you. And then you have some settings here. We've gone through those before. So that's the Essential Sound. Essential Sound panel. Now, the key thing to note here is that Essential Sound is, of course, all of this work is non-destructive. But what's happening with Essential Sound is that it's applying effects at the clip level. So everything that you do when you add denoise or you reduce rumble, or you're removing some room ambience via the reduce reverb, or you're adding clarity, which in fact is the application of a dynamic compressor to your voice or to your dialogue, That's happening at the clip level. It's not happening to everything that exists on the track. And again, the reason you often do that is because think of it in terms of video clips, right? You shoot, let's say you do a multicam shoot. So you have 3 cameras. Maybe they're the same, maybe they're different. Even if they're the same, it could be that the image coming off of those 3 cameras, just based on where they were, how the light was refracting into the lens, they may not look exactly the same, even if they were shot in the same format, everything is the same, shooting S-Log, whatever it is, they may not look identical. So on an individual video clip level, you go in and color correct, tweak the individual clips to make them sort of match. And then once you've matched them, later on, you'll go and you'll grade overall the whole thing to kind of give it a more homogenized stylistic look, right? So you're doing sort of individual clip color treatments. Same thing applies here. Sometimes you want to do those individual sonic treatments as well. So here is this is like an early version of this. And in fact here, I'm going to just zoom in a bit, give myself a little more screen real estate with the audio clips here. By the way, everybody knows I'm like a keyboard shortcut dolt. I can't really remember most things. But if you hold down Shift and you wheel scroll, or in my case, magic mouse scroll the audio tracks here, it will increase the vertical height, which is a very useful one. So let's go ahead and solo this, what says it's track 3 and 4, and take a listen to some of the sound design here. Okay, so if you're listening, if you're listening with your engineering ears, and you'll notice that in some of the cases, now by the way, this was my, I wasn't going to make him add more, but like right here, you'll see it actually took 3 punches to achieve that simple sound. This is really common, right? Especially, and you can see some of the file names here. Smack hit, punch with grunt, pillow, mid punch, all these, the pillow, mid punch, and I think the punch with grunt, those were ones that I did, that I actually recorded. Some of these were from some of those royalty-free BBC libraries. You have to stack these things, and because they're all individual samples from different locations, let's take just a look at this one. So we have the smack hit. So that has some nice attack, but it's fairly, I wouldn't say muddy, but it's not, it's not sort of clear. Then we have this, Super Punch MMA. And then we have this Super Punch with Grunt. Okay? Now, altogether, these actually make a fairly balanced sounding piece of sound design. All right? But it took 3 to get there. And that's kind of the key, is that sometimes it takes multiple tracks, sometimes it takes multiple files, sometimes you just need to fix them to kind of glue them together a bit more. So let's take a listen to a couple of these other ones here. So the top track here, Pillow Deep Punch. So this is like me hitting a pillow in my echoey bathroom. Okay? So it has some nice attack, it has a little bit of brightness, and this one below it has a lot of brightness. So together, but maybe it's almost overshadowing some of the oomph of this deep pillow punch, right? This actually has some nice low frequency. So this might be an opportunity where we want to do some individual treatments on this to maybe EQ some of that bassiness and just make it a little bigger, a little thicker, and then maybe tamp down some of the high-end brightness coming off of that other punch sound effect. So case in point, we can do this a number of ways. Now, I'm gonna sort of focus on essential sound just because I think it's easier to understand the application of the effects. That said, you can also use the effects panel itself, go into audio effects, and then simply drag and drop individual effects onto a clip. The process is exactly the same. In other words, Whether you add them from the effects menu or you do it via Essential Sound, ultimately, whatever you apply ends up here in the effects controls panel. So that's where you find and are able to edit effects applied at the clip level in effects controls. Just like if you're applying effects to video, it appears in effects controls, right? Track effects, they're all gonna live here. All the settings, everything you're gonna do is gonna live here in the track mixer. But clip-based effects are gonna be here. So first thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna clear the audio type because, again, this is an old project and somehow the type got a little mangled there. And I'm going to tell, actually I'm gonna tell Premiere for both of these. Hold on, I may need to clear this one too. Yeah, I'm gonna select these two. Whoops, I didn't want to trim it. And I'm gonna tag both of these as dialogue. Sorry, that's not what I meant to do. Actually, that's fine. Now, actually, that brings up a good point. So this is sound design. So maybe I want to do sound effects. That's what you're thinking. Okay. Now, if I hit sound effects, here's the thing. This only gives me loudness and reverb and panning. I mean, that's fair. Maybe that's what most people would do. It's not enough. So I'm going to tag it as dialogue. Not super intuitive, I realize, but that gives me more individual effects. The idea here is that I'm trying to show you that these are all being applied at the clip level. It doesn't really matter whether you use Essential Sound or not. But by tagging it dialogue, I'm getting all of these things in front of me. You don't have to do it that way. You could also just drag and drop. The reason I'm doing this is because, notice, it's going to give me all the noise controls here. It's going to give me a compressor. It's going to give me EQ, reverb if I wanted that. Again, now that may be nice because I can add a little ambience to it, and all these other things. That's one way to do it, as mentioned. Or, if I clear the audio type, come over to Effects, let's go into Filter and EQ, and maybe I want to add something like the parametric equalizer to this. I can drag and drop it on top of the clip, and again, once I do that, now that parametric EQ appears in the effects controls. Like I said before, if I were to tag this, again, let's just use dialogue because it gives me more things, and let's say that I now wanted to add clarity, which is again compression. Once I enable that, note that the dynamics processor, i.e. compressor, limiter, expander, gate, now appears in effects controls simply because I've enabled that via Essential Sound. You see it kind of appears and disappears, okay? So either way, we're applying things at the clip level. So let's see what we can do. I'm going to take the clarity off for now. Let's go into the parametric equalizer. All right. So in just listening to this, let's do this here. I'm just gonna add do I have my, oh, I do have my play into out here. So let's play this back and loop it. All right, and let's add a little bit of thumpiness in there. Now, what's nice about the real-time parametric is that this is giving you a real-time look at the EQ of this file. And what I actually see is there's a fair amount of low frequency info in here. Now, I don't want to really necessarily mess with subsonics. In fact, I might even want to cut some of those off. So I could, in fact, do that below 40 hertz. I don't really need subsonics. But I do want to emphasize some of those sort of kick drummy fundamentals. And by the way, you can see this is all dynamic. So as I move bank 1 or band 1, you can see the band 1 control point is also moving. So, and we can see right about here, there's a nice little bump right at 70 hertz. So I can now increase that. Now I want to increase that. Do I want a wide Q EQ, or do I want this more focused? Probably a little more focused. So with a Q value of 2, just again, for those of you kind of new to equalization, this is going to be, it's not super narrow, but it's a little bit wide. Watch what happens as I increase the value here. You'll see now we're really focusing on a very narrow bandwidth of low frequency. Here, I'll zoom in a bit more so you can see that, right? So higher Q values mean more narrow focus on that specific frequency. Wider or smaller Q values will again affect adjacent frequencies. So at 70 hertz, if I use like a Q of say 2 or even below, you can already see it's starting to amplify. 60, 50, even again, getting into those subsonics. I don't necessarily want that. So I'm going to use a smaller Q value, let's say around 4. And let's kind of hear what that sounds like. I'll start it at 0, and then I'm just going to start increasing this and hear if we get a little bit more of that oomph. Nice. Okay, cool. Now there's also a little bit of a clickiness in there. I don't mind it. Maybe we can soften it a bit. Maybe I want to amplify a little bit more of there's some nice kind of roomy mid-range in there. So I'm going to go to band 3. And let's go to around 1500 hertz. This one I am going to use sort of fairly wide, okay? Because I want to emphasize just a little bit of the mid-range in this file. So let's take a listen. Can you hear the room better now? And we can also tune it to find maybe that's not the best frequency. Yeah, actually around 19, right around 2K. That's kind of where that nice resonance is for that room sample. I'm going to back it off just a little bit, okay? So again, all of this happening at the clip level. And then similarly now, if we bring that other sound effect in there, okay? So right away you can see that like that punch sound, the other sound, this. First of all, it's kind of dirty and noisy. It's just a little much. So again, in this case, I'm going to take that parametric and drag it on there. Okay. Let's do the same thing. Let's take a quick look and a listen. All right. And in this case, yeah, we're going to keep this fairly broad. We're just going to take a little bit of that edge off. It's a nice attack, but it's a little too bright for me. So again, we're going to start around 3500 hertz, which by the way is one of the classic fundamentals of kind of the crack of a snare. 3500. So let's take a listen. You hear that? Right there. It's like, ah! I start increasing it too much. So that's right. This is what we want to attenuate this. So let's bring this down. Maybe even a little bit more. And maybe we actually decrease the overall amplitude of this as well. Now we have the gain control in here. So we can do it there. That's actually the gain feeding the parametric equalizer. So we do have another option, of course. You can adjust the actual gain of the clip here, or this is another example where I may tag this as sound effects, and then we have a separate level control here inside of Essential Sound. So again, all things Premiere, you always have lots of different ways to do similar tasks. And in this case, it's just allowing us to perform this operation here. Okay. Now it's sounding more balanced. Now it's sounding, and I could hear that room ambience from the other one, the nice thump, plus I have some of the nice crunchy attack from the other one. And this is all happening at the clip level, okay? Now, once we have that, of course, and we have this whole series of punches, attacks, and hits. So let's go ahead and clear the in to out. Smack, 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 I know. By the way, if it's driving you nuts to hear these things looping over and over again, this is how you have to EQ small things. I could just play it once, but I have to keep listening to it. Obviously, with music, it's much nicer if you're hearing a guitar track or a bass track continuously play. You're not hearing the same thing over and over. Sound design can be maddening, but this is how you refine it. So again, now that I have, now these are existing on separate tracks, but remember, there's other things on these tracks. Now, by the way, we just tweaked those first two with EQ and level. And these now sound brilliantly balanced. But now listen to the other ones. Like they sound small by comparison, right? So this is my point. Individual treatments are often necessary. This is really what you have to do to kind of bring everything together. Now, we're not going to do that on all of these. I'm going to show you a little trick now how we can, again, kind of now use track effects to bring everything a little bit closer together. But the same thing applies where you might treat things individually, but then you also have the ability to apply some global effects. So inside of the track mixer in Premiere, now by the way, the default looks like this. How you access the insert and send areas is that you actually click on this little flyout. And I'll tell you, I do actually really like the Premiere Mixer. This though, this is still one of those, if you don't know about this little triangle right here, and I still see this, I see this on Reddit, you won't know that this is how you add effects in the track mixer. So, and we may have a solution to help you with that coming soon. But this is where you do that. And again, now this functions just like any other mixer and any other DAW. So you have your effects inserts in the first few lanes here, and then you have your sends. This is also where you can make things into pre or post fader. All right. And then here is where you have once you have an effect applied, it gives you can individually select parameters in this little panel down here. I almost never do that. Or you can, again, right click and edit them. So in the case of this first track, maybe we want to, add a compressor to all of these punches. Now again, this assumes that I've gone through, and if I were doing this for real, I would individually adjust the levels. Maybe I'd even apply individual compression to some of these individual clips just to get the amplitude in the same range. It doesn't actually mean that necessarily I have to do that for everything, but this is really, really common, Hold on, just checking the chats here. Two Ice Waters, good to see you. Last time I saw you was 2016. Oh my goodness. Well, Two Ice, thank you so much for coming back to Actually, I hadn't streamed on Twitch. I only started streaming multicasting to Twitch just a few months ago. So we've been going to multiple YouTube channels and LinkedIn and Twitter and these other places. I just re-added Twitch again. I didn't know anybody was still there. So hey, thanks for tuning in. Si Busiso Mavibea. Hi, Jason. How are you doing? Very nice. Oh, Ashley's saying yes. Best action sequence. My 5-year-old is loving this too. Oh, nice. You got to start him early, right? And that's the thing. I made him learn how to do this, and then he didn't need me anymore. Like, I got it, And now he's moved. He's segued. He's good in Premiere, but now, of course, the rage for the kids. It's CapCut, and that's fine too. Okay, so maybe we want to apply some compression to this. Okay. So from within the track mixer, come up here to the top, and I'm going to go to amplitude and compression, and we have a series of different compressors. Now again, normally I usually, I tend to use a lot of my waves ones. These are some of my favorites, but I do have a couple of faves in here. You do have the classic dynamics processor, you do have the hard limiter, you have the multi-band compressor if you need multi-band compression, or the simple tube modeled compressor does the trick. It's really great. And again, what we're going to use the compressor for on the track is to affect the amplitude of all of those clips in that track, okay? So I'm going to do the same thing here. Let's do a little in to out. All right. And let's open up our tube modeled compressor. Part of why I love this so much, not only does it sound good, but this is the basic implementation of compression. You have your 5 standard settings: threshold, output gain, ratio, attack and release. You have your threshold slider here. You have your input meter on the left and your red gain reduction meter on the right. So again, I'm not going to go into how to use a compressor in today's live stream. We've done that many, many times, but that's where you do that, okay? And to give these things a little punch, we'll do like a 3-to-1 ratio. They're all actually, again, some of these are samples that I've slightly treated, so some of them may already have a little bit of dynamic compression that I destructively applied to them. This is more to, again, sort of tie everything in that track together. So let's play this, and I'm going to adjust the threshold accordingly. We probably want, this attack might be a little too fast, we'll see. We do want a fast release because we really want it to, to pop, right? If we use a very long release, what happens is it'll compress and it'll stay compressed. It'll stay attenuated. We don't want that. We want, we want the amplitude to basically kind of boomerang back, pow, pow, right? And then if we add output gain, maybe we actually force it to push forward. But we don't want a long release for sort of short attack transients like a punch, right? Because you want it to recover quickly so that you kind of get that kind of like a wallop, So let's do like a 79 millisecond release. And let's just go ahead and play this back and hear what we got. And again, I'll adjust the threshold and settings as it's playing. Okay, perfect. And as you saw on the metering here, I was hitting around -5, -6 on the gain reduction meter. So remember, with a ratio of 3 to 1, that means that for every 3 decibels above that threshold, it's 1 dB at the output. When it gets to 6 decibels above the threshold, it's 2 decibels at the output. And if you listen, you can just hear that it just evened things out. So here it is without. And here it is with. In fact, it's really the hit at the beginning and at the end where most of the compression is happening. And then the ones in the middle, they're like at 3 to 1. So there's less attenuation, but they're all benefiting by having a little bit of that output gain. So that's also, again, what's kind of gluing it together a little bit more, okay? Now, another use for a track effect. Now, one of the things that you typically use on an effects insert is this concept of you're inserting something, which means that you're sending the signal to it, and then that signal is coming right back. It's a send-receive. Compression is a send-receive type of effect. EQ is another send-receive type of effect. Reverb is not typically a send-receive type of effect. And by that, I simply mean you don't typically insert reverb. You actually use the effects sends to separately send your signal, which may already have a bunch of effects applied to it, to the reverb, which probably lives on another track somewhere else. And this is why we talked earlier about pre-fader and post-fader send. All of this is happening inside of the track mixer here. So I might want to send all of my punch effects to one centralized reverb. Now, maybe I want a big echoey reverb, or maybe I want something that's just more room ambient. So you can decide how to do that. So that's what we're going to do. So to do that, to set up this send relationship with the reverb track, first what we need to do is we're going to create a submix. Now, these are all on stereo tracks. These are stereo files, although really they're basically mono sound effects. I think later I did some panning. Actually, I know I did. I showed my son how to do pans so that, if it punched left to right, you kind of felt the punches move. This is the pre-done version, so it doesn't have that. Case in point that we're going to use a stereo submix, okay? And when you do that, you'll see it creates the submix, and then it creates one down here in the track mixer, which we're going to call, let's just call it room verb. I don't exactly know what kind of room we're going to put this in, but the idea being that we're going to globally affect all of those hits with the same reverb, with the same ambience. Okay, just checking the chats here. Okay. Nice, okay. Kind couple of thumps more and a little hi-hat, and you'll start to sound like soul to soul. Ooh, yeah. I would still listen to it over and over, even if it was music. Yes, indeed. Okay, so let's go ahead and add that reverb. Now again, I would typically probably, although the studio reverb is a go-to for me, more generally I like a lot of the Waves reverbs. There's just more variation, but studio reverb is great. I still use it fairly regularly. So I'm going to use studio reverb here. And by double clicking on it, then we can kind of choose what kind of a sound we want. So again, maybe let's just start by determining what kind of sound we're looking for. Now, this is another opportunity to just point out, of course, a lot of presets in here to kind of get you started. And for something like punching sound effects, again, based on the environment we're in, clearly this isn't a room. Now, I've talked about this before. When you're mixing for surround or mixing really for the big screen, it's not uncommon, especially for sound design. Remember, these effects, while that sort of pillow punch had a little bit of my room ambience recorded by default, if the punches are all super dry, this is something you'll find in a lot of 70s movies. Early 70s. And Rocky is actually a great example. The first Rocky, where, again, that type of sound design was, I'd say, I think it's respectable. It was sort of in its infancy. Not that they'd never done it before, but that was kind of the first one where it was a little bit more than you were used to. What you're going to find, and I just saw a 4K print, as I mentioned, of that in the theater with this young son of mine. It was awesome. A lot of the sounds didn't match the environment that they were in. Now, that's not to say that it has to sound like an echoey boxing ring, but they were very clearly just very dry. You know, you watch something today, first of all, the sound design is ridiculous, but they're always matching the environment. So your brain and your eyes interpret the space that punch or hit is taking place in. Well, this is kind of why you do this. So, you know, we could do this in a great hall. Maybe we'll just start with this as an example, but it's gonna be weird to have that based on the visual of where this is all taking place. But let's just start with that one. And then there's two key things that you want to know when you're dealing with sending a reverb to, in this case, a submix, or what's also known as a bus, is that you still have this wet-dry control here. Now, if I'm sending something to the reverb, on the channel where that reverb lives, which is this fader right here, I just want to hear reverb with the signal going into it. I don't want to hear a balance of the original dry signal plus the wet signal. So one of the things that I'll do is I'll set dry all the way to 0 and wet to 100%. Now, the other element of this is where we get into that pre-fader, post-fader thing. Now, I've talked about this a lot. I don't want to get too lost in the weeds with this. But for sound design, there is no absolute. Sometimes you want pre-fader, sometimes you want post. What's the difference? Okay, a pre-fader send means that you are sending the sound of all of these punches to the reverb before the fader, before the volume slider of this track, which means that you have total independent control of the reverberated sound and the original dry sound. Does that make sense? So pre-fader gives you total control. Post-fader, we right-click here or control-click, means that when you send it to that reverb, if I drop the volume slider here on this track, both the dry signal of the original and whatever wet is applied, they all happen on one slider. So this is a choice that you make. There's different reasons why you might use one or the other. To illustrate that, let's start with a pre-fader send here. Let's start this playing back, and I'm gradually going to increase. So the volume setting that you have here, you see there's a nice little tooltip, sets the value for the selected parameter. So that's how much of that dry plus tube modeled compressor punches we're sending to the reverb. So let's take a listen. Okay, so presumably you hear all of that. Okay, now, because this is pre-fader, I just want to hear reverb. He's talking to you, reverb bike. Yes, because it's pre-fader. Getting a little lost in the tech weeds here, but best you understand this because this, again, is something that you have in the track mixer that you don't have at the clip level, right? If I drop the volume of this slider here, I'm still going to hear the reverberated signal. Case in point, take a listen. So that's just the reverberated punch. If I want to bring back the dry punch, okay? And post-fader, as mentioned, now the reverberated sound plus the dries, everything exists on this fader here. So if I drop the fader down to 0, the reverb goes with it. Okay? So you get the idea. So Great Hall, again, doesn't really make sense for the environment here. So I might want to choose, maybe start with something like, room ambience, and then start tweaking those settings. And by the way, by putting everything in the same room, this is another benefit of track effects versus clip effects. It's all going to sort of feel like it's in the same space. That's the idea, right? And I'm not going to individually tweak the room for each one of those sounds. You could do that, but then you're going to add different color to each one of them. By placing them all in the same room, same ambient environment, it's all going to sound, it's going to make the punches sound like they were all done at the same time, in the same place, with the same microphone, all of that. So let's take a listen to this. And once again, wet signal is going to be 100, dry is 0. Let's play around and see what this sounds like. We might need to increase our room or decay here. Let's see. That's actually pretty good. Now, key element here, again, I don't know how much of this is coming across on the stream. Our high frequency cut, I'm cutting off everything around 4,500 hertz. So that means that on the reverb, I'm cutting off the higher frequencies because there's already a nice bit of kind of mid-range in here. We want to preserve that mid-range. That'll be good because there's no dialogue here. So those punches, that upper mid-range or mid to upper mid-range section, that's going to fulfill where the dialogue would typically be resonating. That's where those punches are going to live, which also means that it won't conflict with the music or whatever underscore that's underneath it, okay? And maybe we make the room a little smaller. I might make it a little bigger in this case. Let's take a listen here. Cool. Now, by the way, because these are on stereo submixes, just to showcase to you, you also have the ability to send that signal from this track to left or right or elsewhere. So the reverberated signal can live on the left or right, but the dry signal's in the center. So you can see how this can get really sort of interesting and, again, kind of cool when you're doing sound design. Now, case in point, we want to add in this other track of punches down here, right? So we're going to go to that track. We're going to add it to the same room verb. Let's add approximately the same amount of level. Actually, just back these off a little bit. Okay? And then maybe for the heck of it, let's adjust the balance. So maybe I'm going to pan this track. The reverberated signal will be slightly more to the right. And on this track, the reverberated signal will be slightly more to the left. All right, and let's see how that sounds. Dry. Wet. Someone who's listening and not watching is like, what is happening over there? Okay. So again, by using the track mixer and as track effects, this now allows me to send multiple things to one submix, one bus, one location to affect all of the sound globally. And, if we were to take out the in and out here and just kind of play back this whole little section. Again, there's no music or anything here, but just so you can get an idea. Okay. All of those punches, they all sound like they're in the same environment now, right? You could hear before, very different EQ, very different everything. But now going through that global room ambience, they have the same color, the same flavor, and they all kind of live in the same space. So that's why when you hear, the finished version of the comp here,
You were doing bad things. You wanna fight, huh? Ah!
okay? They all kind of have that same similar quality to them, all right? So that is essentially a look at clip-based effects, track-based effects, and as you saw in this example here, we're using a combo of both, right? We're using a combo of both at the same time. I'm trying to see if there was another cool example of leveraging some of those. Let's see here.
We got the Chaos Emerald, Tails.
Yeah, we should leave now.
Let's get out of here before he catches up to us.
Wait, Sonic!
Yeah, you're so heavy from the chili dogs.
All right. So, super useful, something you're going to use all the time. Essential Sound applies the effects at the clip level. Track Mixer allows you to apply the same effect to anything that lives on that track, which is why, by the way, track organization is super important. I'm guilty here. You can even see, because I have all of this sound design. These are all punches down here at the bottom. But then I got lazy. I'm like, I don't want a separate track just for the helicopter. So that's on the same track as all these punch effects, which meant that if I had a reverb on there, that helicopter is going into that reverb too, which again, might have just been ambience. That's fine, but typically I'll try and group like sounds together. It just makes life a little bit easier, especially when you're doing your final mix. Okay, we've got about 3 minutes, and I promised I was going to show you this. Actually, I'm not going to save that. So let me just open up real quickly the Premiere Beta here. And this should do it before, hopefully we can get to this right before everything ends. See if there's any questions from the chat. Not seeing any other questions. All right. Oh, Ashley, I'm just reading that. Dad loved you so much. Oh. You're so sweet. Yeah. I loved your dad beyond words. You know that. And again, reminder to everybody, check out the Wendle sample pack. Wendle sample pack. Wendle, Wendel, WendleSamplePack.com. It is super awesome. Let's pull the site back up one more time. Oh, just lost it there. Okay. All right. So real quick before we're out of time. So this is the Premiere Pro Beta. Again, everybody has access to this. What I wanted to show you here was actually inside of Lumetri. So let's go into Lumetri Color. And in Lumetri Color, you will now see, sorry, my words got a little mangled there. You will now see that we have a Settings tab. And when you click on the Settings tab, you now, in Premiere, in the beta, coming soon to the release version, have settings for working color space, your sequence, your clip, but most importantly, if I could circle this on screen, viewer gamma. Yes, all the Mac users for years have been like, how come I look at it in Premiere and the contrast is fine, and then I view it in QuickTime outside and it's not as dark, or it's too soft, whatever. Now you can adjust your gamma here, so that when you're editing, when you're working here in your working color space, what you see in Premiere, can now look the same in your QuickTime player. This has been one of the most long-standing requests. So glad to bring this to you finally. Check it out in the Premiere Pro Beta. But friends, that is all the time we have. So thank you so much for tuning in. Have a great rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. Be sure to check out the WendleSamplePack.com as well. Thank you so much to everyone. Thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Simpsy. And we'll see you again next time. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.